Good morning. Welcome to Bible study. So glad to have you back with us for another day, another week of the Whole50 Bible study. You can join us each and every day. I'm a little later than normal this morning at 9 a.m., but usually somewhere around 8:30 a.m. I am live and am so thankful that you are joining us for this study. Today, we're on day 16. My times are in your hands, which is a special passage to me personally, and we're in Psalm chapter 31, the verse 15 verses of Psalm chapter 31. And today's study is made possible by the generous donations of you and so many others who are part of ChristTable.today and what God is doing there. Would love for you to go and check us out. Consider being a part of what God is doing, not just by joining us on Bible studies on Sunday mornings and the other things that are coming, some of which are explained out there, but also want to encourage you, if you're receiving something out of this, to consider making a donation. When you make a donation every month, you're going to get the Bible study and all the materials and things that we utilize. In fact, I'm finishing up the next Bible study this week. So anybody who gives in April is going to get to be a part of that Bible study. You'll be receiving that through the mail if you donate in April. And so why don't we just go ahead and jump into Psalm chapter 31 this morning. Good morning to all of you who I see logging on and joining us, Deborah, Kathleen, and everybody else. So Psalm 31, I feel like we've spent a lot of time in Psalms, but Psalms is the largest book of the Bible and is also one of those that we tend to return to because as a song book, it really runs the gamut of the human experience, just as our music catalog that we oftentimes listen to. If we want to dance, we listen to a certain type of music. If we want to cry or be melancholy, we listen to a certain type of music, maybe perhaps country. If we want to be joyful, we listen to a certain type of music. And so we can find all of those different types of genres in the Psalms as well. And so when we come to Psalm 31, why don't we be paying attention and try to understand what type of genre or what type of a song this is? And it's going to give itself away fairly quickly. Oh Lord, I have come to you for protection. Psalm 31 verse 1 says, don't let me be disgraced. Save me, for what you do is right. And so this is certainly a plea to God for help, for deliverance from something. And so the psalmist is crying out to God as his protector and kind of entreating that, saying, you're a God who protects. I've come to you for protection. Please don't let me be disgraced. Oftentimes, we do this type of thing with God as well, right? We come to him and say, God, I know that you're a loving God. This is what I need. God, I know that you are a giving God. This is what I need to buy. God, I know that you're a God who gives protection. This is what I need protected from in this moment. Please don't let me be disgraced. So it looks as though David, who is the songwriter here, is in danger of being disgraced over something. Yeah, I was just looking over here to make sure that it is a Psalm of David. And it is a Psalm of David, which means it's a song that David has written. Turn your ear to listen to me. Rescue me quickly. Be my rock. Here we have it again. Be my rock of protection, a fortress where I will be safe. You are my rock and my fortress. I have to admit, so many times in life, other things become our rock. What is a rock? A rock is a foundation. It's our stability. Think of it as the foundation to your house, what it is built upon. And so many times in life, what we build our stability on is our career. We build our stability upon our education, upon our certifications, our degrees. We build our stability upon sometimes even ourselves. We build our stability upon our extroverted ability to talk our way out of anything or talk our way into anything. I'm a networker, and so I can get another job. I'll be safe. If anything ever happens to my employer here, I'll be able to work or talk my way out of it. Sometimes our foundation is built upon, our stability is built upon money. It's built upon what's going on in our bank account, what's going on in our 401k, our safety net for retirement, what's going on in the stock market. The psalmist here clearly is relying solely upon God to rescue him quickly, a fortress where he will be safe. If your bank account is your fortress, if your home is your fortress, if your career or your current employer is your fortress where you're going to be safe, you're living on a dangerous foundation. History itself shows that the world changes quickly. Even your own life probably shows that the world changes quickly. And there have probably been moments where you have lost that foundation, and now you're trusting it for your stability. How long will that last? Even your life doesn't confirm that that's the way these things work. And yet we're lulled into a false sense of security whenever God is not our rock or our fortress. For the honor of your name, God, verse 3, lead me out of this danger. Pull me from the trap my enemies set for me, for I find protection in you alone. Boy, that line right there, that line should be a life verse for many of us who have a tendency to find our protection, our foundation, our fortress in other things. Maybe this is the line that should be our life verse. I find protection in you alone. Maybe we should be writing that on Post-it notes and putting it on the mirror in the bathroom, putting it on the steering column, the steering wheel in our car, putting it right on the refrigerator door. I find my protection in you, God, alone. And the word alone there is the opposite, is the operative word, alone, because nothing else in life is going to be able to truly protect us from the times in which we live, right? We live in difficult times, whether it's financial, whether it's racial, whether it's political, whether it's professional, whether it's relational. We live in a time where nothing is stable, and things that appear to be stable are never stable for long. And so what do we find our protection in? We might find some of our protection in God, but do we find our protection in God alone? I entrust my spirit into your hand. Now, I read this, and that line, for anyone who's ever gone to an Easter service or a Good Friday service, should stand out to you. I entrust my spirit into your hand. Hey, wait, you stole that from Jesus, who was hanging on the cross. Well, no, maybe Jesus stole it from here, which I'm just going to add this in as bonus points here today for you. You know, we have the sayings of Jesus on the cross. The sayings of Jesus on the cross, there are like 7 of them. I thirst, into my hands I commit my spirit. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Don't turn your back on me, God. You know, we have these 7 things that usually around Easter time that we'll rifle through. All of those can be found in the Psalms, which means Jesus stole all of his best lines from the book of Psalms, which I suppose wouldn't be stealing technically. He is God. Or Psalm is a songbook, right? Jesus didn't say those things on the cross, like right here, I entrust my spirit into your hand. Jesus sang them. Jesus spent the hours on the cross singing. singing from the book of Psalms. Psalm 31, Psalm 24. Think about that for just a moment. Jesus sang during what is the most horrific event probably that a human could go through, crucifixion. Jesus took that time to sing songs that were familiar to him. And the clues would have been absolutely obvious to the Jews of those times, because they would have immediately recognized those words in the writings of Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, and would have known that Jesus was singing from the Psalms, the songbook. And one of them comes from right here, Psalm 31, Psalm 31, verse 5. I entrust my spirit into your hand. Rescue me, Lord, for you are a faithful God. I hate those who worship worthless idols. I trust in the Lord, but these other people don't. Clearly, I will be glad and rejoice in your unfailing love, for you have seen my troubles, and God sees your troubles. He sees what you're going through, and he is not ignoring it, no matter how it may feel. You care about the anguish of my soul, David says, and God cares about the anguish of your soul. He has not forgotten you. He has not given up on you. He has not abandoned you. And whatever you're walking through, you have not handed me over to my enemies, but you have set me in a safe place, David says. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am in distress. Tears blur my eyes. Even though in this moment you may be safe, you may not be in harm's way. Harm may feel like it's knocking on the outside of your front door in this moment, ready to bust it down and break into your life. And David feels this way. He is in great distress, crying out to God for mercy, for help in his time of trouble. Tears blur his eyes. My body and my soul are withering away, and you know how this feels. I'm dying from grief. My years are shortened by sadness. Sin has drained my strength. I'm wasting away from within. If you're not going through this now, at some point you will go through what David has gone through, and likely at some point you have gone through what David has gone through here. And so whenever David speaks, you know what it feels like. And in fact, so often I think in those seasons of life where we've walked through times where our body and soul felt like we were withering away, and where we were dying from grief, and where our years seemed to be shortened from the sadness that we felt, and sin had drained our strength, and we were wasting away from within, we try to repress those feelings, to push them down. And so it may be difficult for you to go back and admit that you felt this way, because going back and admitting that you felt this way means pulling open the door to that filing cabinet, pulling out that file folder, and experiencing the grief again, experiencing the difficulty and the heartache again. And so we resist the urge to go there. And sometimes resisting the urge to remember those times actually can prevent us from receiving healing in these moments, from receiving help in these moments. It can prevent us from seeing that God took care of us and rescued us in those times. And so we're in danger sometimes whenever history repeats itself and we get into trouble and distress again. Sometimes we end up turning to the wrong things because we forget God. I'm scorned by all of my enemies and despised by my neighbors. Even my friends are afraid to come near me. When they see me on the street, they run the other way. I am ignored as if I were dead, as if I were a broken pot. I have heard the many rumors around me, and I am surrounded by terror. My enemies conspire against me, plotting for my life. But, and I love it when I see a but in the sentence, but I am trusting you, O Lord. I'm saying you're my God. Even in that moment where David is feeling as though things may not be assured, the outcome may not yet be determined, even when David is feeling in deep distress, and as though God is not acting quickly enough to help him, is God going to come through? David says, I'm still trusting you, O Lord. Where else am I going to turn? Who else am I going to trust? You are my God. And I love this next verse. My future is in your hands. Rescue me from those who hunt me down relentlessly. That verse. What an amazing verse. My future is in your hands. The truth of the matter is, whether David likes it or not, the future ultimately is in God's hands. And whether you or I like it or not, our future is also in God's hands. We can do a little bit to affect our future, usually by harming it rather than helping it, right? I feel like more often than not, the ways that I affect my future is to do more harm rather than to do no harm in my future. You know, I screw up more than I get things right. And so this verse, for those of us who are screw-ups, or for those of us who don't feel capable enough of managing our own lives, especially our own spiritual lives, this verse should be a release, should be a breath of fresh air. Ultimately, God, my future is in your hands. Now, I got to say, this verse actually, I don't know that life verses are kind of funny to me, but if I have a life verse, if I have a verse that I continue to return to and that I cling to, it's actually this verse, Psalm 31:15, and so it's special to me. Now, when I memorized this verse, this is the way it read. The New Living Translation says, "My future is in your hands," but most of the translations will say, "My times are in your hands," and that's actually a more truthful translation of the passage itself. Is "My times are in your hands." You know, the use of time or times in this passage, really it's making more than just a remark on the passage of time here and the passage of time being in God's hand, because underlying this surrender, and this is what this is kind of a surrender to God, saying, you know, I'm throwing up my hands. I can't control any of this mess that's around me. Maybe it was David's fault. Maybe it wasn't David's fault. Who knows? But at this point, the outcome of all of this is going to be determined by factors other than David. And David is imploring God to be the determining factor in how this all turns out. But at the end of the day, David says, my times are in your hands. And that's a surrender. And it's a surrender by essentially saying, David is here saying that life is made up of a series of decisive moments in which one can take either an appropriate direction or an inappropriate direction. And our future will be determined in large part by God, whom we cannot control, but also by those series of decisive times and moments in which we either take an appropriate course or an inappropriate course. And David here essentially says, I want to respond to this circumstance well. And so in this moment, responding to this difficulty in this circumstance well is by admitting and recognizing that my times, my decisions, all of this future is really in your hands. You know, we can respond in different ways to difficulties. We do have free will. And like I said, we do have some control over some things. One response is to seek control. really, whenever difficulties come our way, whenever we're faced with decisive moments, is to take control and to manipulate the situation to our advantage. And so often this is how we get into situations like David is here, is because we've tried to take control of things that were either outside of our control, or when we took control in a way where we made decisions that were not healthy spiritual decisions. And in so doing, we tried to manipulate the situation to our own advantage. And anytime we try to manipulate situations to our own advantage, we end up failing God. We end up failing ourselves. We end up with a mess on our hands. And that's kind of what it seems like David's enemies here, his opponents, are doing. They're manipulating some moments to their own advantage, and David is the one who is caught in the middle of it. And so he's crying out to God to help him, to protect him. The other thing that we can do whenever we come to decisive moments is not to take control, not to manipulate things to our own advantage, but to surrender what we want. Historically, growing up, my church would have called that one's own personal will, my own will, to give up what I want, what I think is best, how I think a situation should go, give that up and give that over to God, to his power, to his authority, so that the outcome will be his. And that's what the psalmist seems to be doing here. When he's saying, my times are in your hands, David is saying, I recognize that these other people are trying to manipulate this situation to their advantage, and it's causing me distress. It's causing me discomfort. I may end up being disgraced in all of this unreasonably. And so David says, the natural tendency for me would be to do the same, to also try to take control of the situation and to manipulate it to my own advantage. And David is saying, I'm on the right side of this thing, so it would be acceptable for me to do that if the outcome goes my way, because I'm in the right here. But David says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to manipulate a situation or control it to my own advantage. Ultimately, my times, my future, all of these moments are in God's hands, and it's up to God. How many times have I done that? How many times have I looked at a situation and said, yeah, I can control this and manipulate it to my advantage, but at the end of the day, once I start manipulating things to my own advantage and controlling them to my own advantage, what have I done? I have become that which I hate. I've become that which is evil. I have become my enemy, and in so doing, I am in no better place. And so either I believe that God is in control of the universe, and even when things don't seem to go my way, ultimately they will go my way if I act with integrity, and if I act in a way that actually professes that my times, my future is in God's hands, not my enemy's hands. I either practice what I preach or I don't. And this is maybe why this verse has become, over the years, my life verse. It's because I've chosen to just simply say, my times are in God's hands. I'm simply a steward of the things that he has given me, and I will steward them well, even if it means, to use David's words, I look a bit disgraced here or there, unreasonably. So, this isn't a simplistic fatalism here. This isn't just a simple, que sera, sera, whatever it may be will be, that I practice, that David practices. No. When confronted by life-changing, and in David's situation, perhaps even life-threatening circumstances, it's not simply saying whatever. It's more than simply saying whatever. It's a call to people who are followers of Christ, to people who are followers of God, to understand the times, to be perceptive, to perceive what's going on in life, and to be sensitive to the character or the purpose of God, and to respond appropriately each and every time, even if that means the situation is out of your control. My times are in your hands, which means my times cannot be in my hands. I have to let go. You have to let go. And as trite as it may sound, let go and let God. It's really, truly the only option as a follower of God. Because when we don't let go, we're no longer a Christ follower. We're a self-follower. And I'd much rather be disgraced and be a Christ follower, having done nothing wrong, than to do something wrong and suffer the alternative. Rescue me from the hands of my enemies, David says. I talked a lot about who, but I wonder what are your enemies? David needed rescued from his enemies. Your enemy may be that person, that neighbor, that relative, that coworker, or your enemy may be a thing. What you may need rescued from is your money. It's your bank account. It's your safety net. It's your boat, your car, your second house, your job. Your times may be in something else's hands right now. And if they're not in God's, then you made a catastrophic error. But there's still time to fix it. There's still time to be rescued from that which has become your enemy. You're not in control. Well, you're in control of the decision that you make, but ultimately you're not in control of the outcomes of the world. Give those over to God. Your times, my times, are in His hands. And until tomorrow, happy reading.